Once upon a time, there was a lovely princess, but she had an enchantment upon her of a fearful sort, which could only be broken by love's first kiss. She was locked away in a castle, guarded by a terrible fire-breathing dragon. Many brave knights had attempted to free her from this dreadful prison, but none prevailed. She waited in the dragon's keep, in the highest room of the tallest tower, for her true love and true love's first kiss. Yeah, like that's ever gonna happen. What a load.
Oh my gosh.
Look who it is.
We are back.
Thank God. Oh
yeah. For those of you who maybe did not see our social media posts, Elo and I just submitted earlier this week on Monday our master's dissertations for our History of Art degrees at University College London.
Woo! Thank goodness it's done.
Yeah, so that's why we have been MIA, but we did put up most of the episodes up on YouTube with accompanying images.
And I have to thank Megan for this. She's the technology whiz.
That was my form of procrastination, which is kind of sad, but oh well.
There are worse ways to procrastinate.
So we have one more. I had to get the Hua Mulan one up, but then we will be caught up with that. So if you ever need like a reference or something. But this week, we will be shocked if you do not know what we are talking about.
Drum roll.
This week on Modern Medieval for episode 10, our first double-digit episode, we are going to be talking about the wonderful, glorious Shrek.
I remember I watched it. I think did it come out when we were really small or like
2001. So
I was 96.
You were like, well, I'm 94. I was 6/7.
I'm so smaller. God, I can't do math. Yeah, I was
We were young.
No, I was 5. I was 5. There we go.
Okay,
math.
There you go.
And I remember being terrified by it, but now looking back on it, it was really funny.
Really? You were terrified by it?
I think I was afraid of the dragon, and it kind of caught me by surprise, and I was just like, oh my God, that's scary.
That's so funny too, because the dragon is like so unthreatening when you look back at it in hindsight.
I just look at it now and think, oh, this is kind of really entertaining.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, I remember seeing it and, of course, laughing at all the like fart jokes. And, as we get older, and Elo and I'll talk about this as this episode progresses, but there's a lot of adult humor, a lot of really smart humor in this, as well as, very formulaic kind of younger audience targeted humor. It's kind of crazy to think. So this was 2001. This came out at the same time as the first Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, really? I hadn't realized. I mean, yeah. Admittedly, I haven't watched all of them. So
you're going to have to this fall when we talk about that. But yeah, so it's just kind of interesting to think in regards to like time chronology, because this felt younger than that, and I was actually quite shocked that this was 2001. Looking at the animation, you can see that it, compared to where we are now with CGI, it is dated, but it still holds up pretty well considering.
Yeah, I admit that in my mind, because I rewatched and I was like, oh, like you can definitely tell that it was done before, technology got so good.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it was, better defined.
Oh, better, like the definition of everything?
The definition of everything. And I was just of course, kind of surprised to see that, no, it wasn't. So it's interesting how you remember these things, right? Like,
yeah. I guess the thing to me that ages it the most is the human faces, because they're still kind of scary.
Yeah.
And very like big eyes that feel separated from the face, but they're not horrifying, like Sid in Toy Story, which was 1994, 90 something. So anyways, we are so excited to talk about Shrek. For, if you've heard of the meme, Shrek is love and Shrek is life. That is definitely a PG-13 plus rating meme. So if you're younger than that, we do not recommend. We do not want to taint your innocence.
Did you know that there was a guy who got a job as a meme consultant?
No, that sounds so 21st century.
Yeah. I was just very surprised. I saw that on, I think it was Lad Bible or something, so maybe it's not that true. But like, I saw that, I was like,
Interesting.
Random fact of the day.
Yeah, there you go. Learn something new. So to start off with Shrek, I mean, there's been 4 films of it, lots of spin-offs of like Shrek the Halls, Scared Shrekless, and some other things. I mean, there's a Shrek Fest that is bonkers. Like people dress up like characters, usually Shrek. They have like an onion eating contest. I mean, the dedication to Shrek. I mean, there's also been like Shrek weddings.
Really?
Which are, people they dress up like ogres. And I mean, that's great dedication to it. But so Shrek has become such a cultural phenomenon. And I didn't really know this until I was doing, background research for the episode today, by which I mean looking at IMDb trivia and going onto Wikipedia because the scholar that I am. And so Shrek is actually based off a children's book from 1990 called Shrek with an exclamation point, written by writer and cartoonist William Steig. And that book was about a repugnant and monstrous green creature who leaves home to see the world and ends up saving a princess. So similar but different. But the name Shrek is a romanization of the Yiddish word Shrek and corresponds to the German Schreck, which is Schreck, and means fear or fright.
Huh. I don't know. I found it quite funny how you said Shrek 3 times.
Shrek, Shrek, Shrek. Shrek, 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 Shrek.
It's like that episode on Friends where Phoebe's trying to teach him French or something.
I literally just watched that episode.
Oh my god! And then and she says something like "Je m'appelle whatever."
Yeah.
And he goes, duh, 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 duh.
He's like, le poo. So yeah, that's kind of a curious. I didn't know that Shrek had like a linguistic root. And then furthermore, I found this in the trivia, but the character, this could be wrong, so please don't like attack me if this is wrong. I'm going off of IMDb trivia. But it says the character of Shrek is based on a figure in Russian folklore under the same name, dating as far back as 1200 Common Era.
Huh.
So
that'd be interesting to research, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess I could see him. He is like a monstrous figure. And so being part of some sort of folk tale. But I found that going back to 1200, I mean, that's quite a long time ago. So yeah, we'll have to do some more research on that and, touch back up. So in the research I was doing, this is not related to anything whatsoever in regard to like history or medieval studies, whatever. But for those of you who don't know, I am a huge Nicolas Cage fan. Huge. Love Nicolas Cage. I have a sequin pillow with his face on it. I quote him a lot. And so apparently, I don't know if it says Nicolas Cage was initially offered the role of Shrek, but he turned it down as he did not want to look like an ugly ogre. In 2013, Cage admitted that he regrets the decision, explaining, quote, "When you're drawn in a way, it says more about how children are going to see you than anything else. And I care about that," end quote. But I don't know if this is like Nicolas Cage offer before Chris Farley came on. He was originally going to be Shrek, and he did a lot of recording for it and then tragically died from a drug overdose. And so there was debate over having like an impersonator come in and finish his lines. His brother thought about doing it for a while. And then that ended up being scrapped because they just didn't want to dishonor Chris Farley, the great, comedian. And so I don't know if Nicolas Cage was before or after that, but I just feel like any sort of relation of him to Shrek, even in this very disconnected way, just makes it that much better because I love Nicolas Cage.
I didn't know anything about this. I really liked the actor, the comedian,
Chris Farley.
I thought he did a really good job. Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I always thought that he died earlier in the 90s, but apparently, though Shrek did take about 5 years or 6 years to make, it took a really long time. So that's why it was able to reference films that were in production but hadn't been released. So the scene Fiona is fighting Monsieur Hood, the Robin Hood character, and she freezes in the air and does her hair. That's a reference to The Matrix, which was released in 1999.
Right.
But because this came out later, they were able to reference it because it wasn't a spoiler for something that hadn't come out yet.
It had become a cult.
Right. So I just find that quite interesting.
I actually had forgotten. I mean, I don't know if I'd forgotten or didn't know that Cameron Diaz was Fiona's voice.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me that she does the voice. It just seems kind of like a random choice.
Yeah, she's so interesting though, because I feel like you know her as the the action girl kind of thing, and then she's done quite a lot of rom-coms, and then actually now she lives this kind of blasé, cool, chilled life, and so it's interesting to see her associated with this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was during her kind of peak moment of doing the rom-coms and the action films. But yeah, it just seems like such an obscure choice. And then with the cast members, Mike Myers is Shrek, and then Eddie Murphy is Donkey. It's just a bizarre
it's such a strange cast. Also, Eddie Murphy as the donkey, I mean, I think he makes the film, really.
No, definitely. I think he got numerous awards and accolades for his character at being so good. And I was reading in the trivia that he felt that if Eddie Murphy was if I were to die while this movie was out, I think they would just put a picture of Donkey in the obituary rather than me.
Oh, Eddie Murphy. What is he doing now? Do you know? Or because I don't really follow films and stuff.
I honestly can't say. I think he kind of stepped away from the limelight. I mean, he did Daddy Daycare, but that was in the early 2000s to early 2010s. So, not sure.
Right. Okay, well.
I mean, same with Mike Myers. Mike Myers did, the Austin Powers, Love Guru. And then he, aside from Shrek, I think he kind of stepped away as well, which is fine. I mean,
fair enough. You make $1 million. You can, walk away.
Yeah. Wow, that just put Kelly Clarkson in my head. Walk away. So getting to the medieval in this, I mean, the movie is set in a medieval aesthetic.
Yeah.
That's not hard to see. And so with the armor that's used in the film by the soldiers, Shrek wears armor briefly when they're in the castle rescuing Fiona and everything. Apparently an armor expert was actually brought in to show the animators the different types of armor and to be not only inspiration, but for the animators to see how the armor moved. And I just think that's quite, interesting as it was so early on in CGI that they were thinking of that. I guess it makes sense because the animation was so rudimentary, but...
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel with these, the final product seems like nothing in comparison to the amount of work that has actually been put in. So it's really interesting. I also thought it was quite cool how it started with the manuscript.
Mm-hmm. Which is a definite...
that as toilet paper, which is kind of funny.
No, so with that, the director of Shrek, or the creator, I believe it's Jeff Katzenberg. I could be wrong. Jeff Katzenberg. He produced it. But he used to work at Disney and then left due to different visions and everything. So that's part of the reason why there's just so many digs at Disney in this.
Right.
The animosity. And So DreamWorks, who is the creator of Shrek, actually had like lawyers to make sure that they couldn't get sued or anything by Disney for what they make fun of. But yes, I mean, that opening scene with the book and the telling of the story, and it's a medieval illuminated manuscript, for those of you who don't know, done in a very kind of charactery way. But I mean, Sleeping Beauty is the first one that pops into mind. And we talked about that when Janina was on with us. But yeah, then there's the whole pivot of he's just like, what a load of shite, which is great. And then I really loved how they played with Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty in the film, especially when Mirror's talking about the like maidens or princesses, and Sleeping Beauty, or not Sleeping Beauty, I'm sorry, she's not one of them, but Snow White, where he's like, she does live with 7 men. And it's just like, as an adult, that's so funny because it's so true.
Yeah. I also kind of thought it was really funny how, like, you know, the mirror was like to, what's his name? The little guy. Oh, the prince.
Oh, Lord Farquaad.
Lord Farquaad. It was like, yeah, so there's this candidate number 2, candidate number 3, and then like he describes them, and then like all of the guards like number 2, number 3, and he kind of goes into this existential crisis, and that was just like a funny commodification of women.
Well, it's such a like game show host, you know, like Blind Date or whatnot, which was funny. Also, in that the large like character that's in the executioner hood, when he's like number 3, and then he puts his hands out and they're 2. He has 2, and then he kind of lifts in his hand. It's just funny, and it made me think of Monty Python and the Holy Grail and how King Arthur couldn't count.
Oh, I do relate.
Yeah, I mean, same. You heard us trying to do maths at the beginning of the episode.
Sorry about that.
It's both of us are struggling, but that was funny. That character is quite humorous. The executioner guy. I don't know if he has a name in this movie. I think in later ones he does, and it's something like, oh, it's Thelonious. Speaking of like that character, talking about darkness in this movie, I had never really like clocked this until this time. I had like vaguely clocked it, but when Lord Farquaad is walking into the like torture chamber for the first time with Gingy, the gingerbread man, Thelonious is dipping Gingy's head into a glass of milk. Yeah. And there's a shadow of him dumping him. That is torture. That is milk boarding. And I always kind of like clocked that, but I never put the two together. Like, this is some dark shit. Like,
yeah, it is. Also, I mean, if you're like, you know, they're playing the game of like, well, it's a cookie, so it's fine. It's not actual torture. And then you're like, no, but actually, he is a cookie. Therefore, it is torture.
Right. Well, and that, like, I mean, he's a living, talking entity and, like, feels the things that are being done. And so, like, when Farquaad has his broken legs and is, like, playing with them in front of Gingy, I was like, fuck. That's is true. Some dark, morbid humor, but good. And it's just, again, those layers. I guess this is also gesturing towards what we talked about in our episode, Laughing with the Medieval. I mean, this whole film, I feel, is playing with those ideas. I think laughing at much more, but like the fart humor and the scatological humor in this film is actually incredibly Chaucerian, which is not something you immediately think of, but then that would be more of a laughing with rather than a laughing at. Like, for example, I came across this article by Kathleen Coyne Kennedy called The Medieval Entertainment Channel, The Shrek Quartet. And I'm just going to read her little blurb, like a paragraph. But she says, for the past several years, whenever I teach Chaucer's Wife of Bath's Tale, circa 1385, students say, it's like Shrek! At a cultural moment in which everything is available everywhere at once, what we formerly thought of as a unidirectional, that is chronological, so progressing through time, arrow of influence and illusion has morphed into a matrix of multiplying and constantly reorganizing relations and affinities. By day, beautiful, human, and white, and by night, ugly, ogre, and green, is a loathly lady analog that people encounter in the realm of pop culture before meeting, if ever meeting, her medieval sisters. Fiona and the Loathly Lady live in what Mikhail Bakhtin calls great time, in which cultural productions break through the boundaries of their historical moment, and, I would add, swirl around in a kaleidoscope of new, never-to-be-repeated patterns. I just found that really interesting, and especially because of what I'm wanting to do with my PhD.
Which, by the way, we forgot to announce.
Oh, yes.
You got in.
Woo! I got in to both of my programs, but I decided to accept my offer to study at the University of Manchester, where I will be studying with medievalists Anka Bernau as my primary supervisor and fucking David Matthews as my secondary.
You'll have to tell us if he's scary.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, when I let him know the email, said that he's known both of them for a long time, that they're both like wonderful and lovely. And Bob is love. Bob is life. Like,
he truly is.
So I take his word for it. But I mean, David Matthews is like the scholar of medievalism. So very excited. But I'm kind of doing a similar thing as with what Coyne Kennedy's talking about in regards to Final Girls in horror Gothic and martyred saints, specifically the Virgin Martyrs. So it was nice to see that overlap, but also going back to Shrek, just showing how actually or arguably medieval it is.
It's
not
true.
Just aesthetically, but tonally as well.
Yeah, I also thought it was kind of interesting as well how, like, if you take, the moment where he first gets invaded by all the
all the fairy tale creatures.
All the fairy tales. And I was like, this is so interesting because obviously most of these fairy tales were written down in like the 15th, 16th century, but we always associate them with the medieval. And then like this is like taking it and kind of making it even more atemporal.
Right. Especially because then they throw in these very modern or contemporary to our time elements, like when the three little pigs at the end are like breakdancing, singing Smash Mouth, or even just like Duloc itself, which is both a totalitarian state and its monolithic structure, but also a total jab at Disneyland with the parking lot, which I was telling Elo before we recorded. It's such a small detail, but I sincerely chuckled because it's such a smart detail. When Shrek and Donkey are walking to Duloc and they're walking through the parking lot to get to the entrance, on one of the signs, it says like, you're in lot A or you're in lot B. Instead of that, it says, you're in Lancelot. And I just found that pleased me so much.
I didn't even realize. I kind of wish I had.
You can go back and that.
Now that I'm unemployed, I can do all of these things.
The dead time. But then they go in and they play the, Welcome to Duloc song, which is in the same register, same beats per minute, tone and everything of It's a Small World at Disneyland, the infamous ride, where they're like, Duloc is a perfect place. They have the funny scene where they're like little marionette puppets or like something, wash your hands, wash your face, but all their butts are facing. It's like they were gonna say something else that adults get and children just laugh at.
It's so interesting, right? With cartoon films or like films that are mainly for children, how many dirty digs there are and how like often the humor is meant to appeal to grown-ups as well.
Yeah. And when Shrek first came out, that was something, especially in this film, more so than any of the Disney films or previous Pixar films, was how much they got away with in this film and how smart they were with this adult humor. Because apparently in the writing process, the two like producers didn't agree on the level. One wanted to be much more child friendly, if you will, and the other was like, no, throw in the adult stuff. Because like parents have to go see the movies with the kids in the theaters. So you
have to veil it enough so that children don't understand that it's something that, is bad.
Right. And I think Shrek is so genius at how it does this tiptoeing. And then also just it's such a pop culture like vessel so many gestures, not just to Disney, but to other films, music, lifestyles. So one of them is a reference to The Godfather. So when Shrek and Donkey defeat the knights at the tournament, and Shrek turns to the crowd and he says, "Try the veal." This is a line as part of a line spoken by Sollozzo to Captain McCluskey when they meet with Michael Corleone in The Godfather, so 1972.
Right.
Both of these lines are spoken before major character life-changing moments, which I just thought was kind of thought-provoking. I don't know if that was necessarily intentional. I feel like it has to be. But I mean, one would never think that like the Shrek and Godfather share something like that.
Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't have really associated the two.
No, I wouldn't have either. This is, again, thank you to IMDb Trivia for those. What would you call like a major Shrek fan? Like a Shrek hard? A Shrekian?
Like a Trekkie, right?
A Shrekkie? Yeah, let's call them Shrekkies.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of similar types of people.
No, I mean, they love what they love, and that is wonderful. I mean, in my Googling, I went to the like Wiki Shrek page, where people fan base everything, and was looking into like the Shrek universe. And it's quite funny because, it says like it largely imitates fairy tale fantasy settings with medieval technology and society combined with magical elements. It is populated by humans and fantastical creatures. And then it goes into the politics. And it's like politically, it has systems similar to those of the Middle Ages, with the two known countries being monarchies, Far, Far Away, a kingdom, and Duloc, a lordship. Some places, like the swamp and Merlin's house, seem to be separated from legislatures. And it's just like so great because it's like written so professionally.
It's true. It's so interesting because like behind every film you have like I was just thinking, even like the lawyers who were there like watching Shrek and trying to see if what they've done was okay and wouldn't get them into trouble. It's so interesting to see that within something so funny and so like young, you'd have like such seriousness behind it.
No, exactly. And I also find the Disney, the lawyers needing to be around because of the Disney jabs quite like interesting, because fairy tales are not owned by Disney, but I guess it was like the way that they satirized the Disney interpretations of those, because like Snow White is not Disney's.
No.
Disney had a certain interpretation of it. And so of course in Shrek, like when Snow White is in the glass coffin, I guess, that like looks very, very similar to the Disney Snow White. Or at the end when Fiona transforms into her true love's true self and she becomes the ogre. I mean, Beauty and the Beast, when a beast turns into the man, like 100% with the way that the light's like shooting out of her body. But aside from those, I mean, Pinocchio is not Disney's, and the Pinocchio in this does not look like Pinocchio in Disney.
No, it's true.
So I found that, I guess it's like, what is the line between satire and, I don't know what it would be, like plagiarism or something?
Yeah.
Or libel? I mean, they're not speaking bad of it. So I found that just like a very curious thing. So what's your favorite scene in the movie? Hello, do you have one? Putting you on the spot, sorry.
I think the one at the beginning where he's all by himself, Shrek, and he takes the wax out of his ears.
To make a candle.
Yeah, I was just like, kind of disgusting to kind of relate. I thought that was quite cool. I also thought it was very interesting how they managed to, like have a story that's children appropriate of like, oh, this guy's by himself because he's excluded and no one likes him. But the truth is he is a very likable guy. I thought that was quite cute as a general story.
Yeah, especially because it gets actually across a really important message of like, beauty's on the inside. But
yeah, exactly.
I find that this actually does do a great job, especially in the end with Fiona turning into an ogre. And, she's like, I want to be beautiful. And, and Shrek overhears her talking to Donkey and he thinks that she's talking about him, but she's actually talking about herself and how she's relaying these like projections of society of like, you have to be the pretty, skinny princess. And in the end, she's a very kind of like thick, curvy, like green ogre, and she's like, aren't I ugly? And Shrek says, no, you're beautiful. And it's just so heartwarming and cute. And like, it's such a valuable message.
It's true. And also like, especially as a child goes into adolescence and puberty and all of that, things that I'm very glad I no longer have to repeat. It is kind of an important message where you kind of feel out of control and like you can't control your appearance or, your growth spurts or like, your voice goes funny or you grow disproportionately and that kind of thing. And so it's kind of important that this kind of things, keep that in mind,
Oh, definitely. I agree. And I don't think I really valued that message until this watch, which is quite sad because it's literally been 2 decades since this movie came out. And I've watched it
I feel
numerous
old.
times. I know, me too. But I just found that like a really beautiful message, regardless to if you actually process it or not. I mean, I think you register it on some level.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same spiel that, parents tell you all the time.
Right. And I mean, yeah, take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But I think that beauty, if you will, of the message is why this film has
still
become
relevant. Yeah.
Such an icon, like why people love it so much.
Yeah. And so on this little note, if any of you who are listening want to come on the show and speak about your favorite film, please, let us know.
Yeah, let's make it medieval. And also a quick shout out to my friend Ailish, who actually mentioned Shrek being Chaucerian. She's a Shrekkie. Whenever anything Shrek comes up, we message each other. So thank you, Ailish, for mentioning that, because this was before I found the article and thought to even think of looking along those lines. You are a
Thank
gem.
you.
Yes. I bet there's a lot more to talk about regarding Shrek. However, we may want to do a Shrek 2 conversation, because that is arguably one of the best sequels of all time, like out of any animated or live action films.
I've forgotten what that one's about, so I'll take your word for it and agree with you.
Yeah, and it has a lot of other medieval elements. So Shrek, the original one, is much more of a medieval quest with the knight, even though Shrek's imperfect. He's not the medieval ideal of a perfect knight, but it's kind of along the lines of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, or something quest-based, rescuing the girl from the tower, and then of course it plays with those ideas and tropes. Whereas Shrek 2, I can't recall the other 2, 3, and 4. I know they have babies at some point, but that one is much more of like a romantic medieval. So that'll be fun to talk about at a later date. Maybe episode 20, keep it on the 10s with Shrek.
Wow.
I don't know, Ella, if you want to if you have any final thoughts?
No, actually I don't. I'm very, very much thoughtless.
That's all right. We're still recovering post-dis.
But it's been really lovely to do this again. And I hope you guys enjoy this.
Getting back on it. Yeah, apologies if we're a little rusty, but our brains are functioning crazy levels. Yeah. So, Ella, why don't you tell our audience where they can find us?
So you can find us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts by typing Modern Medieval Podcast. You can find us on social media. You can find us on Instagram by typing podcast.modern.medieval. You can find us on Facebook, as we have a Facebook page and a Facebook group, by typing Modern Medieval the podcast. You can find us on email by typing modern.medieval.podcast@gmail.com. And the final one, which, we all know that I'm no good at this, so I'm just going to pass this on.
Yes, so Twitter, you can find us, our handle is @medieval_modern. We post all of the, updates about episodes there, as well as little tidbits. We also have officially gone up on Amazon Music, the podcast.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Processed and approved, so you can also find us there. I think we were supposed to cross over to Audible, but I'm not 100% sure, as that's an Amazon program. And then, everywhere else that Elo mentioned, please send us your thoughts, comments, memes, questions, corrections, Anything and everything. We are, especially now that we are out of the dissertation zone, we have nothing but time on our hands.
Yeah, we've got also more mental energy to dedicate to this.
Yes, definitely. Until next time, I'm Megan.
And I'm Ella, and this is Modern Medieval, the podcast.